on May 29th, I was at the church, and I was preparing for some of our graduates. They was having a celebration, and as I was preparing that, I was getting everything ready for the night, and I find my iPhone alert on my iPhone. Now I know what that means because my phone is always on silent, and I know that when I hear the Find My iPhone alert, that is my wife calling. And so I'm like, oh, shoot, I got to answer that because she's been trying to text me or call me. And she answers the phone. She picks it up and she says, Jamie, get home right now. Kinley's been in a bad scooter accident and they're life flighting her right now. You need to get home. So I was like, what is happening? And so we have a electric scooter and we live on a dead end road. So I rushed home as fast as I could and got home. And as I pulled back our road, I saw the fire truck and I saw 2 highway patrolmen. We live on a dead end road, and you know, I get up there and there's the ambulance, and I run in there, and Rihanna's in the ambulance with Kinley, and she's unresponsive. She's got throw up on her. Her clothes are ripped up. She has a neck brace on, and it was like, what is happening? And I was kind of in a moment of shock because I didn't really know what was going on, and they're like, we're going to have to life flight her. Like she's had a bad accident. So, you know, when she kind of mentioned a little bit, but in her accident, she actually slammed her head on this side, and when she slammed her head, it actually caused her brain to shift, so she had like a brain bleed hemorrhage on the other side of her brain, and she had we didn't really realize at the time, but they thankfully allowed me to go in the life flight with her. We get the children's in less than 15 minutes, and from our house in to south of Mount Orb, and when we got there, we go in, and there's a team of like 30 doctors and nurses there, which is always overwhelming. And, we walk in, and as we walk in, I'm just like, what is going on right now? I didn't really know what to say because I was, I guess, still in shock, but I was trying to be present. I was trying to be there. So they checked her in, and they discovered that she had a large laceration on the left or the right side of her brain. She had a large laceration, and when they looked at that and they did a scan, they realized that there was a fracture from basically like her jawbone, like all the way up her skull, and they showed that her brain is actually bleeding on the one side, and that was a really overwhelming moment, and something that you never think that you have to go through as a dad. You never think that you have to experience just a scooter accident on a flat road with, no traffic. But that was a day that I never thought that I would want to see. And then when you hear the words, you just never want to hear that your daughter's got a traumatic brain injury. And that's an overwhelming moment because, I used to work with brain injured patients, and I know what that means. It's not a good thing. And so, so all that's going on. And as I'm looking there, it wasn't really our girl laying there. Yeah, she wasn't really present. She wasn't really there. She was just slept the whole time, slept for days. And so, when we were in the hospital, there were so many things that, just seemed, every little tiny small thing was just a crazy victory when we were in the hospital. There were so many valleys, there were so many mountaintops while we were there. And it just kind of felt like, when you're there, like you're experiencing highs, but you're also experiencing really low lows. It just felt like the time in the hospital, we was on a roller coaster while we was in there. And so we continually, we had people, pouring into us, especially through this church. So if I've not told you, thank you for helping our family through that time. The people were continually pouring into us through DoorDash gift cards or money or providing for our kids. We had family watch our kids and friends watch our kids. Some of you guys sent so many prayers and so many words of encouragement. But during that entire time while we were in the hospital, it's almost like the Lord was replaying the theme of Psalm 23 over and over in my mind. And the Lord so graciously taught me so much about Psalm 23 while I was in the hospital. And, I don't think that from this point on that I'll ever look at this chapter the same again. because when you walk through it, when you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, it hits a little bit differently. Now, what a lot of people don't realize about Psalm 23 is that it's actually a trinity of Scripture. And a lot of people don't realize that, meaning that there are scriptures that actually go together with Psalm 23. You know, you've heard Psalm 23 quoted at funerals and things like that. And, you know, some of you guys have probably stood by a graveside and they quote Psalm 23. But the reality is today is that I want to humbly remind you that, oh, Lord help me. If you're here today and you do not currently have a relationship with Jesus, Psalm 23 is actually inapplicable for your life. Because in order for you and I to experience the benefits of Psalm 23, we have to understand the redemption in Psalm 22. Because Psalm 22 is a perfect prophecy of the crucifixion of Jesus. It coincides with John chapter 10, where Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. And the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He also goes on to say that I am the door. Now, what a lot of you guys may not realize about a shepherd is that a shepherd, that they had a sheepfold where their sheep would go into. But you see, the shepherd would actually, there wasn't an actual door. The shepherd himself would actually lay in front of the door. That way, if any wolves or any lions tried to come in, they would be guarding the sheepfold right there by that entrance. If the sheep tried to get out and run and go their own way, they had to get over the shepherd before they did so. So Jesus reminds us in Psalm 22 that he is the good shepherd. And the good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. So he isn't just a good shepherd. You see, because the only way you can experience Psalm 23 in your life is if you cling on to the hope of Psalm 22. And so we can't just have Psalm 22 to lead us into that. You see, there's also Psalm 24 that reminds us he's not just the good shepherd, that Jesus is also what we like to call the chief shepherd. Now, I want to just read this. The earth is the Lord's in all its fullness, the world and all those who dwell therein. For he has founded it upon the seas and established it upon the waters. Who may ascend the hill of the Lord, or who may stand in his holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart, who has not lifted up his soul for an idol, nor sworn deceitfully. He shall receive blessing from the Lord and righteousness from the God of his salvation. This is Jacob, the generation who seek him, who seek your face, Selah. Lift up your heads, O gates. Lift up your everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O you gates. Lift up you everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord of hosts. He is the King of glory. So we must believe in him as our Savior and our Lord, the Good Shepherd. But if we believe him for salvation, it is essential that we believe in him, that he is coming for a spotless lamb in Psalm 24. Some people go through this, and when we talk about the chief shepherd, it actually tells a little bit about that in 1 Peter 5:4. It says, and when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that will never fade away. So you know what? I'm so grateful for the good shepherd that allowed someone like me into the sheep pen. I'm so grateful that I have the hope that one day my chief shepherd is going to come back and get me out of this nasty world and take me home. I have the hope of that. And you know, some people will sadly spend their entire lives and all they want Jesus for is a good shepherd. You spend your entire life and it's like, I've got the salvation of the Lord. I'm just going to lay here as a fat, lazy sheep and wait until the Lord comes back. I've heard so many people, it's like you early on in their Christian lives, like, oh, I just can't wait to just go to heaven. And I can't wait to go to heaven either. I'm grateful for the Good Shepherd. I'm looking forward to the Chief Shepherd. But I'm thankful that in the in-between, Psalm 23 reminds me that he is my shepherd. So today I just want to just walk through and teach you what the Lord has shown me through Psalm 23 while we were in that hospital. I'm going to go ahead and read it. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So I'm just going to break this down verse by verse. So there's a lot to learn here, but I think I want to just share with you what the Lord has taught me through Psalm 23. The first is this, is that the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. That's the first lesson that we come to when we're in the valley. You know, when I read this, a lot of times when I think of a shepherd, we just kind of think like, oh, he takes care of the whole flock. And so a lot of times we just see, just sheep as a whole. You know what I'm saying? Like when you see a shepherd out on a hillside, a lot of times they have the entire flock there, and they are with the entire the flock as they are, guiding them along the hillside, especially in Israel. So, when you read that about the shepherd, that's a lot of times what I've thought and how I picture him. But you see, the hospital changed my perspective a little bit while I was in there, because you see, he doesn't just lead us as a whole flock, he actually still leads us individually as well. The subject of this passage, when you read it, is not the sheep. The subject of this passage is the shepherd. It has to do with exalting the Lord, which is what we were doing today during worship. When everything happened with Kinley, there were moments where, I'll be honest, when you go there, like you have no control. Like, Lord, please bring her back right now. Or I'm trying to do things in my own power. I'm trying to encourage her and all the things. But in my own power and my own strength, there was nothing that I could do. There was nothing that I could do. I couldn't heal her. I couldn't stop the pain. I could pray for healing. I couldn't speed up the recovery. I know in the beginning, Rihanna, she felt just horrible about man, I should have been there. I don't know how long. We don't have any idea how long she laid back there. And thankfully, Rihanna was actually home. But, and there was a lady back there that never is home. And she was actually home that day and actually saw her laying in the road. So the Lord was there. I actually, when Rihanna felt that way, I know she was just feeling a lot of guilt and shame, which is that mom guilt, a lot of you moms probably understand that. And I did a deliverance prayer, just renouncing those lies over my wife. And Rihanna said after that time, she saw Jesus standing over Kinley while she was there in that accident, while she laid there in the road before anybody found her. So the shepherd was not just my shepherd, but the shepherd was there with Kinley as well, individually. When we couldn't be there, the shepherd was there. He was in the waiting room when she arrived. The shepherd was there in the waiting room. In those dark nights of the valley, he was there. He was there in the pain. He was there in every single scan. You see, a shepherd's job isn't just to give directions. A shepherd's job is actually to stay with the sheep. And many of you have moments in your life where maybe you have personally felt forgotten or abandoned, or like you don't matter. And I know sometimes in life it can seem a lot like, well, nobody notices me. Nobody understands me. Nobody cares. Maybe God just moved on. Maybe God doesn't hear my prayers. And I know some of you guys have experienced things like that. Or maybe you're currently in a season where you are walking through that. But our shepherd never loses sight of the sheep. I just love this idea that he is my shepherd. Because, there's things that my wife just can't do. There's things that Aaron or Matt just can't do in my life. I'm thankful that I have a personal relationship with the shepherd. It's almost as if we have bragging rights when we're saying, he's my shepherd. He's my shepherd. I just want to just brag on my shepherd for a little bit. You know, I didn't need the path to see. My shepherd was there. My shepherd could see the path. When we couldn't carry the weight, my shepherd could. When the fear tried to creep in the middle of the night and anxiety tried to come in, my shepherd was there guarding the door. He's my shepherd. And I know for me, I can't just rely on the salvation in Psalm 22. I can't just only cling to the hope of Psalm 24. If I just stay there, I will actually miss that I actually need the shepherd every single moment, at every single second of the day, every single hour. It is important that I realize we have to have Psalm 23. I need a right now shepherd in my life. I need an ever-present help in times of trouble in my life. You see, some of you have Psalm 22, and because of the salvation where you put your faith in Jesus, you have the hope of Psalm 24. But you see, the problem is we leave out Psalm 23, and a lot of us have become our own shepherds. One thing I've realized is that it's not if you go through the valley. Because I promise you that if you haven't been yet, you will go through a valley. Whenever you go through that valley, who or what are you going to allow to lead you through it? Because whatever your shepherd you choose in your life will determine your destination. Some of you have been through a valley and have allowed alcohol and drugs to be your shepherd through it. Some of you have like allowed popularity to lead you through seasons of life. If I can just get a platform, if I can just be promoted. Some of you, your marriage is struggling and you're just not as intimate. Well, we just fell out of love with each other. So you allow lust and adultery to lead you through that hard season of your life. Some of you guys, I'm telling you, I've been guilty of it myself, but some of you parents, we are guilty of allowing the sports teams and the sports schedules to lead us through life. But I'm grateful that every single one of those things are really bad shepherds. Jesus is the only one that is my shepherd. Who is your shepherd? Because he's mine. I've got a personal relationship with Jesus. And because he's my shepherd, I've learned that, I don't want anything. The older I get, the less and less I want. Throughout that entire process in the hospital, we didn't lack anything. There were people saying, like, what can we do? How can we help out? You see, the shepherd put my family and friends in place to care for our younger 3 children. The shepherd used some of you to send us so many snacks. We had an overwhelming amount of snacks and are still eating on those snacks. When we needed food at home or we needed food in the hospital, the shepherd put on some of you guys' heart to just send us an abundance of DoorDash gift cards. While we were in the hospital, all 3 of us never ever had to get cafeteria food one time. Why? Because my shepherd cares for me, because I have a personal relationship with him. The shepherd surrounded us. I'm just thankful for this, that the shepherd surrounded our family and this family here with the greatest sheep ever. It's so true that the older I get and the closer I get to him, I realize that I don't really need anything. My wants have changed in my life. Because you see, when you understand him as your shepherd, you will realize that you actually really do have all you need. It's just the truth. The closer I get to the shepherd, the more my wants have changed. I remember younger on in my in my days of marriage, I just wanted to, all the time. I was like, oh man, like one day I'm gonna get a bass boat. One day I'm gonna, I'm gonna go hunting all the time, and I'm gonna have all these trips and all this stuff. And I'm telling you, I used to be obsessed and love those things. I used to be obsessed with basketball and all those things. And all those things that just fill my time. And I'm like, man, like I just want to have all this stuff. And, I remember me and my buddy, we actually planned when we were in like 7th grade, probably like earlier than that we were actually going to have our own house, and we were going to have a bowling alley in that house and all this stuff. Like we're not going to get married. We're just going to live a bachelor pad and all this stuff. But I've just realized the older I get, the more I realize everything's taken care of. And the ones that I used to have are no longer ones that I really even care about. I couldn't tell you, honest, I love to fish. I can't tell you, I went fishing once this year. I can't tell you, it's been years now since I've even went hunting. Why? Because I don't even care about it anymore. Because all I do is I want to be near the shepherd. So he's not just my shepherd, but it also says that he makes me lie down in green pastures. Sometimes a shepherd knows that we need rest in our life. I know that I have a greater understanding of this verse because when she came out of it, she was pretty feisty. I'm not kidding you. She fought us. When she came out of an MRI, she wanted to... actually, the very first day they tried to put her in an MRI, like she fought and like, get me out of here. And I'm like trying to like, Kinley, you got to calm down. You got to lay still. You can't get up right now. And the very next day they had to actually put an anesthesia in her arm, and they had to give her an NG tube. And so as soon as she gets out of the MRI, they did the NG tube while she was in the MRI, so that while she had the anesthesia, she was out of it, and they were able to put that in there. But I had to hold her down. I had to hold her arms down. I had to force her to sit still. Kinley, you can't pull this out. And she was unaware what was going on, and she probably don't remember any of this. There was a moment where just for her to sit 5 minutes with speech therapy was an impossible task. She was like fidgeting, like I want back in my bed right now. And I remember as her dad, I had a thorn, and I sat on the edge of the bed, and I said, you will not get back in this bed. You're going to sit here and you're going to do this. Because the only way for you to get healed and the only way for you to get better is to go through this process. I had to step in because she didn't understand. For literally like 5 days, Kinley slept. She would get up to use the bathroom, and she just came back and slept. She didn't eat, just had fluids going in her arm. Rhiannon and I couldn't leave her side, so she was forced to rest. It was really hard to just watch her lay there and want to sleep all day. One thing about being in the hospital is that when you're in the hospital, schedule stop, plans stop. Life stops. It's different. And we're a busy family. We both work full-time jobs. Rihanna works very long hours. I'm always never know what hour I'm going to work in the day. It could be like you just never know. We've got busy lives. And there are some lessons that we learned that we wouldn't have learned if we were running. Because we were able to pray over our nurses while we were there. One nurse, every time she walked in the room, and she said, every time I walk in here, I just get cold chills, and I don't know why. And she said, you know what? I've been hearing you guys talk about your faith, and I see all these Bible verses posted all around her room. She said, I actually need to get back to church. We got to pray over our speech therapist. We got to pray over our transport guy. When I was actually forced to slow down, I went out to get a few things one evening. As I was out, there was this lady sitting there outside of CVS. And you know those people. When you see them, it's like you're just trying to walk by because you're in and out of that store. You guys know what I'm talking about? It's like I'm just avoiding this person at all costs. And you know what actually changes when you're actually in that moment? You're actually forced to slow down and stop and have a conversation. Because I was forced to actually have a conversation with a lady named Sapphire. And she actually had went through a whole lot in her life, and I didn't even tell her I was a pastor or anything. And she starts telling me that she's, her husband cheated on her 5 different times, and she's currently alone, and she's going through a hard season in her life. And I was able to actually pray over her, and this lady just starts oh my goodness. She said, I feel the Holy Ghost. And she was all into it, So if I would have been running, if I would have been doing my daily normal task, I would have missed that opportunity. Sometimes the Lord has to force us to slow down. I know if you're anything like me, there's so many times where I miss opportunities because I'm always on the go and not taking time for others. Sometimes he has to put us in a position where we have no other option but to trust him. The thing about sheep is they don't actually naturally lie down. They don't do that. Sheep are very nervous, very anxious animals. According to shepherds, sheep will not lie down if they are afraid, hungry, fighting with each other, or anxious. Sheep only lay down when they trust the shepherd. There's a book, it's called a Shepherd's Look at Psalm 23. It was actually written by an actual shepherd, and his name was Philip Keller. And he said that there are 4 conditions that need to be met for a sheep to lay down. And I was blown away by this because it just kind of goes right with where we're at as a church. Number 1, they have to have freedom from fear. Sheep panic at the sudden movements of predators. They will only lie down when they see their shepherd is nearby to protect them. They also need freedom from friction. Sheep establish a social pecking order and will butt heads over territory. The shepherd's presence quietens them, that rivalry, and establishes peace. They also need freedom from flies, parasites, warble flies, and gnats. They drive sheep crazy, and then they keep stomping their feet all the time. The shepherd applies soothing oil or repellent to relieve them from that irritation. They also need freedom from hunger. If a sheep is constantly running away, a shepherd will actually put the lamb on his shoulders. I've actually heard pastors say this, and I looked it up to see if it was a real thing. And just sorry to break your your confidence in this, but a shepherd actually doesn't break a sheep's legs. You've probably heard people say that, or pastors in the old day, and I don't know where that came from, but actually a shepherd will not break a sheep's legs, because here's the thing: if they break one of its legs, it can't run when a predator comes. So a shepherd will not break a lamb's leg to keep it from running away. But a shepherd will put the lamb on his shoulders. Now that does mean a few things. The goal of that is not to punish the sheep. The goal is not isolation from the rest of everybody else. The goal of this is actually proximity. When I'm running all the time, when I'm trying to do things all the time, it's hard to hear his voice. When you're just busy all the time, you can't just stop to hear his voice. When we're just running scattered all the time. But when he makes me lie down, it puts me in a position to be able to hear his still small voice. Sometimes the shepherd has to stop us in order to restore us. I don't know if you know this about sheep, but they're actually what they call ruminates. Now, when a sheep is out in the pasture, they graze really quickly. They just keep eating. They just continually eating. They graze really fast. And because of that, it fills what's their first stomach compartment, which is called the rumen. So they fill that with grass, right? It's almost like they fill that, but then it actually comes back up later and they can re-chew on that. Now that's really important, because it's almost like when I read a Bible or I hear a really good sermon, like I'm feeding on the Lord's word, but a lot of times it's not connecting right away. You guys know what I'm saying? Like it just doesn't just hit home right away. It just doesn't apply to my life right away. Sometimes I got to just chew on that for a little while. And I'm so grateful that when I chew on that a little while, it actually comes back up later on. Because I don't know if you guys know this or not, but that word ruminate actually means to meditate. You see, the shepherd makes the sheep lie down because ruminants cannot properly chew the cud while they are running around or stressed out. They must be still. So when God makes us lie down, it's often because we have filled our head with truth, but we haven't had time to process it yet. So that's why we need to feed on the Word of God so that when those seasons does come in our life, those scriptures can back it up. Because let's be real, we live in a culture that glorifies movement. We're constantly on the go all the time. Keep scrolling, keep chasing, keep posting, keep performing, keep praying, keep proving yourself, keep grinding. But God is often trying to do the exact opposite in our lives. I remember Rihanna's dad, he was actually a cattle farmer. And he would have different sections. He had like a 200-acre farm, and he would have sections of their farm actually sectioned off where the cattle could roam. And they could roam freely, and they could eat all that grass, and they were actually in a safe space. But there would always be that one cow that tried to get out, and because it had to try to get in the other fields. And if you're a farmer, you can probably relate to that, because that's like your daily life is constantly trying to get the cow back in the green pasture. Now, when those cows run out, they don't realize that they're actually running away from the pasture that they were intended to be in. You see, because a lot of us, for example, we see the green grass on the other side, and we think, man, that looks way better over there. So what do we try to do? We try to get out of the presence of God because we think that things are better over there. Can I just tell you something? That when I go out in my yard and I go near my septic tank, do you know where the greenest grass is? It's actually right by that septic tank. And that's a word for some of you guys today, because I'm telling you, the enemy wants to tell you that the grass is greener on the other side, but I'm here to tell you today that he's actually just full of crap. We can run so much that we want to leave the field that God currently has placed us in. Some of you guys are exhausted because you're carrying things that you were never ever meant to carry. You're carrying fear about the future. You're carrying the pressure to fit in, anxiety about what people think about you, guilt from past mistakes. Young people stress about your grades all the time, pressure to have it all figured out. But the shepherd doesn't make the sheep lie down because he's trying to control them. He makes them lie down because he knows that they can't heal while they're constantly running. Some of you guys have been running from the Lord. You've been running from the pain. You've been running from fear. You've been running from silence in your life. Maybe the shepherd today is inviting you to stop running and finally just rest in him. He then goes on to say, he leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. Going back to that moment where we had to get Kinley the MRI. We did it day one, and we knew like she had not been eating, so we got to get this MRI to figure out what's going on and why she's not eating. And we're in there in the MRI, and I go in there, and I'm sitting beside her. As soon as they push her in that thing, she gets out of there. She's like, I want out instantly. I want out of here. And so the doctor said what we can do is we can actually just give her an anesthesia. And I don't really know much about anesthesia. I don't know much about brain injuries to know how does that coincide. I've heard mixed things about anesthesia, all this stuff. And so I was concerned as a dad. I'm like, I need more time. I can't just make this decision right now. So that night we actually went back to the room and we prayed about it over the night. And that was a really hard thing because we knew that she hadn't been eating. We knew that her body needed to do that. And so the very next day, Rihanna's like, I just feel peace about this. And we prayed about it. And so I had to sign hey, we're going to get the anesthesia. Now that's a hard decision to make because it doesn't feel like still waters when you're in that moment. It feels like a raging river, and you got to make this decision fast or your daughter could potentially die. So when you're in that moment, it's very, very challenging. It's very, very hard. When you sign the anesthesia, it says they could go into cardiac arrest, they could die, all the things on that paper. And so that's pretty scary when it gets in front of you. And we had to make that decision. And as soon as we make that decision, we were getting ready to go to the MRI. And the neuro team comes in and is like, no, we need to get an NG tube in her while she's got the anesthesia. And I'm like, hold up. I just spent all night doing this decision. And we felt very rushed and very forced into this decision. And it felt very overwhelming. I don't want to put a tube in her because I know that God's going to bring her out of this. And it felt like, you just struggle, a lack of faith or what's going on here, Lord? Like God, help me make this decision. It didn't feel like still waters in that moment. But God doesn't want to just give us rest. He also wants to give us peace. And he doesn't just want to give us peace. He wants to give us restoration. What is David doing here with this portion of Scripture? David is painting a picture of a shepherd who just doesn't give sheep a place to survive. He leads them to places where they can be refreshed. Sheep, if you guys don't know this about a sheep is actually scared to death of rushing water, because if they get in that water, their wool is very heavy, so it'll weigh them down and they'll drown. So they're terrified of rushing, raging water. So if a shepherd's leading them and there's no actually water around that is a calm pool or anything like that, the shepherd will actually dig out a pool by hand and make it to where that fresh water comes in and the sheep can drink from it safely. I know a lot of times that we're looking for God to be just some loud thing, you know. We're looking like, all right, God, just pour out revival. Everybody in our church just get saved, Lord. Everybody, Lord, just like all this crazy loud things, you know. We're always just seeking the loud things all the time. We're looking for the exciting things. But sometimes he leads us not to something that's loud, but he leads us to something that will restore us. Our culture loves excitement, but God often works through stillness. And some of you guys today, you don't even realize that you're spiritually thirsty because you've been trying to be your own shepherd. You've been trying to drink from other pools, and you're thirsty. You know, we've seen the Lord restoring Kinley every single day. We've seen her get stronger and stronger every single day. We've seen moments of what feels like setbacks in our life. But it's just really incredible to see how God's restored her every single day. I know a lot of people might have looked through this process and saw Kinley like, oh, she looks fine to me. Everything looks good. But we had those moments where we knew that God's still doing some restoring. She still has some limitations, but God's still restoring. Some of you guys look good. You laugh. You put on a front like everything's great. But in those private moments, you know that the Lord's doing some restoring in your life. Then goes on to say, he leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. God never restores us so that we can stay where we are. David doesn't say he leads me in easy paths. He doesn't say he leads me in comfortable paths. He doesn't say he leads me in a paved path. It says he leads me in paths of righteousness. You see, the thing about the shepherd is he always leads them in the right direction, even if it's a hard direction. I'll be real, I would have never chose that path for our family. I would have never written that into our story. I don't want to write that into your story either. Times like that. I would have never done that. I wouldn't have chose any of that stuff that we had to go through. But even places that we don't want to be, I know that God is leading me. See, what a lot of people don't know is that when you hear green pastures, if you actually look at the hills in that area over there in Israel, there's not green pastures. It's like rocky, barren land. But here's the thing that the sheep actually does, the shepherd actually does, is if you look from a distance, you'll actually just see a barren hill. But if you get a little bit closer and you get in the perspective of the shepherd, there's little paths that go all along the hillside that are following along through there. And those sheep are just following along those paths. And as they're following those paths, there's actually little rocks and things here. And there's actually green, lush grass right around those rocks where they can grow. And so what the shepherd will do is he'll actually lead them along that hillside, and they're just eating as they follow the shepherd. It's not like it's a smooth, easy path, but the shepherd leads them along that path. Man, I'm so thankful because he leads me on paths of righteousness. But it's not just he leads me on paths of righteousness. He does it for his namesake. Every single bit of what Kinley has went through in her life and what we've went through in the past month, He's been leading us along paths that we wouldn't have chose. But every single bit of it, I promise you that it was for His name's sake. We have had people that have reached out to us. We have had thousands of people. I have people from all over different countries around the world reaching out about Kinley's story. I've had people reach out that say, man, I need to get back in church. Like, this story's really inspired me to get back in a right relationship with God. It's not about us. It's all for His name's sake. Then he says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. When we were in there, it seemed like we were on a roller coaster every single day. We experienced a lot of valleys every single day. There was one night in particular that I remember very well, that fear and death was creeping in the room. And her heart rate was starting out. It was like 55, 50, 55, 50. Or no, it was like 50, 45, 50, 45. And it was a repeating process on her heart rate going back through that. And I'm like, oh, geez, Lord, that doesn't seem right. And so you see that pattern. And then a little bit later, in the middle of the night, it then drops down to 40, 35. 40, 35. So you see this progression. And it's like, well, if this is a rhythm and this is a pattern, it's going to keep dropping. And so in the middle of the night, it's very scary because we couldn't do anything. We couldn't help her. I just felt like I just want to do something for my daughter, but I can't help her right now. Lord, we need you. And we were just desperate. You know, when you're in the middle of the night, you can't just call anybody you want. You can't just share something on Facebook for people to pray. You need the Savior. You need the shepherd. And when we were in that moment, we were in that room. The nurse came in and she said, you know what? I know what she's going, but we need to keep monitoring this. We need to get an EKG on her because she could develop something that's called Cushing's triad. And a lot of you guys maybe don't know what that means, but that brought a lot more fear because when you hear what they're talking about, you instantly want to look it up and never look it up when you're in that moment. What that is actually increase in cranial pressure inside of the brain. That is where it's a life-threatening medical emergency, often signaling impending brain herniation, and which could lead to death very instantly. So when you're in the middle of that dark night, when you're in the middle of that room, I'm telling you, you can't do nothing about it. The only thing you have in that moment is a shepherd. We were weak. We could barely pray. And thankfully, the Lord sent us a nurse at night. And in that darkness of the night, we actually had a night nurse that was there the entire time we was in the trauma unit. And she came in the middle of the night to check on Kinley. And thankfully she was a Christian lady from Crossroads Church. She was a young lady. And she said, why don't we just lay hands and just pray over her right now? And the nurse just began to hold her in and lay hands on Kinley and pray over her in that hospital room. The lady's name was Lucy. Now, for those of you guys that don't know what the name Lucy means, the name Lucy actually means light. And so in the midst of that dark valley, the Lord sent a light to guide us. The Lord sent a light to comfort us. The shepherd sent everything that we needed in that moment to get through it, to cry out to Him. Notice David didn't say, I camp in the valley. Notice he didn't say, I live in the valley. Notice how David never ever said, I will die in this valley. He said, I will walk through this valley. Know that whatever you're going through, the valley is just a location. It's not a destination in your life. It is not a permanent address that you were meant to stay in. The hospital was not our permanent address. It was only a place that we were passing through. And some of you guys have the fear that whatever you're currently going through is your address. Because it seems like you've been going through this thing so long. And then maybe this is just the way things are. And maybe you're just meant to die in this valley. I'm always going to be anxious. I'm always going to be lonely. I'm always going to be broken. I'm always going to struggle with this temptation. I'll never get past it. I'll never be healed. I think one thing that I've realized is what might feel permanent today is only a chapter of the story that God's writing in our lives. I'm so grateful that we don't have to fear any evil because He's with us in the dark. Something I never noticed before. And when you think about the shadow of death, in order for there to be a shadow, do you know what has to be present? There's got to be light present. So your valley might look pretty dark. It might look pretty dim. But I promise you, the Lord's right there beside of you. He then goes on to say, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Notice how it wasn't the green pastures or the still waters that comforted David. It was the weapons and the tools of the shepherd. You see what the rod was? The rod was actually a short thing that was like a heavy-duty bat in a way. And sometimes the shepherd would actually put nails inside of this club. And you know what that thing was meant for? It was meant to knock wolves in the head. They would carry that on the one side, and then they would also carry what they call a shepherd's staff. And when a sheep would wander off, I never did realize this before, but when a sheep would wander off, a lot of times they got their head down because they're always looking down. Do you know what actually that shepherd's hook actually will do as they're walking down? It hooks around their neck and it lifts their head back up. It's like, oh, lift your head up. Lift your head up, How many times do we need the Lord to lift our head up when we're in a situation? I'm so grateful that when we got our head down, Lord, what are we going to do? The very next morning, it's like, get your head up. I brought you through this. Don't you think I'm not going to bring you through this as well? Get your head up. Some of you guys need to hear that today, and you need to be reminded to lift your head up, because right now it might seem hopeless in your life, but lift your head up. The rod reminds me that God is fighting battles that I can't fight. But the staff, as I mentioned, they're for the sheep. Keeps them from going astray, all the things. I think we spend so much time thanking God for what we can see that we fail to thank Him for what He's protected us from. We couldn't be there with Kinley. We don't know what really even happened. We'll never maybe even know. But I'm so grateful that I don't have to know, because He's guarding me, because He was there with Kinley, because He's protecting my home, because He stands at the doorpost of my home and He protects my home against the enemy. I'm so grateful that when I'm down or discouraged, He can lift my head up. He then goes on to say, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Now when we read that doesn't sound like a cool thing for the Lord to do. It doesn't sound like a God that's punishing our enemies. It doesn't sound like God is making our enemies flee in this moment. Why is He doing that? It doesn't sound like the God of Psalm 68:1 that says, let God arise, let His enemies be scattered, let them also that hate Him flee before Him. It doesn't sound like that God in Psalm 23. Oftentimes, God will scatter our enemies and flee. Some of you guys, especially on our prayer team, you have prayed and you have watched the enemy flee. Last year in our crusades, this guy actually watched the enemy flee, and out in the woods, I just felt this leave me. Sometimes the Lord will make our enemies scatter. But in this instance, it doesn't seem as if the enemy is being punished. In this particular instance, God is preserving the enemy. Now, why would God do that? Notice that at this banquet feast, the enemy is present at the banquet. We go from a field, now we're transported inside into the banquet. I always used to think that the enemy was sitting at the table right beside of him in that banquet. But the thing about the enemy is that the shepherd will not give the enemy a place at the table. The enemy can just hover around the table. And it still bothers me. Why did God allow the enemy to be in the banquet hall? Sometimes the Lord will preserve the enemy just so He can be in proximity to watch the favor He's about to pour out on your life. And he's like, you know what? You tried to bring destruction against him. You're going to sit here and watch this because I'm about to pour out my blessings upon this. And we're just sitting there just eating like, man, this is crazy. Like I'm getting like all fat on DoorDash and I gained like 30 pounds in the hospital. But it's like, he's just got to just do it, you know? We're seeing prayer after prayer answered over and over again. And we're just sitting there at the table and all the enemy can do is just stand outside the door and watch. The enemy tried to take Kinley out. But what the enemy failed to realize was that who her shepherd was. That he's not just a shepherd that protects, but he's a shepherd that prepares the banquet hall. Fear was in the room, but so was Jesus. The diagnosis was present, but so was Jesus. The uncertainty was present, but so was Jesus. The enemy, sometimes the Lord would just give him a front row seat to his provision. And his punishment is to sit there and watch it. Some of you guys, the enemy may be present in your life. But he's not invited at the table in your life. Because God don't give us a spirit of fear. Anxiety may be still talking to you this morning, but it doesn't get a seat. Fear may be present in your life right now, but it doesn't get a seat. Temptation may be present in your life, and you may still be struggling with that addiction, but it doesn't get a seat in your life. The shepherd decides who sits at the table, not the enemy. Sometimes God doesn't remove the enemy in our lives. Sometimes he prepares a table right in front of them. Sometimes he lets fear watch as he gives us peace. Sometimes he lets anxiety watch while he gives us strength. He then goes on to say, you anoint my head with oil, my cup runs over. One of the biggest struggles for sheep in the summer months was these things called nasal flies. And what a nasal fly would do, they'd actually fly up in their nose and they would lay their larvae and they would go up into their brain and they would just like go crazy and they would start like sheep go crazy and they just start banging their head off of rocks and stuff, trying to get rid of the pain and trying to get comfort. So what a shepherd would do is they would actually coat the sheep's head in an oil mixture. And what would happen is those when those flies tried to get in and they tried to land, that they couldn't land because because of the oil. The Holy Spirit anoints our minds to guard us against the small, buzzing, toxic thoughts of worry and anxiety that try to take root and drive us mad. We were in that hospital. We anointed Kinley. We anointed him. We anointed her. Another reason was during mating season, you know, like the sheep would just butt heads and they would fight and there would be disunity in the group. So a shepherd would put the oil on their heads. So that way when they tried to butt head, their heads would just slide off of each other. When we were in the hospital, we anointed Kinley's head with oil. He then goes on to talk about the overflowing cup. What happens when you're at a banquet back then, a host would fill a guest's wine cup to the very brim. If the host loved what the guest wanted, if the host liked the guest or thought very highly of them, they would keep pouring the cup literally until it overflowed onto the table. And what that was, it was a visual declaration that says, you are not a burden. My supply for you is limitless, and you are welcome to everything that I have. The Lord wasn't just filling our cup through Kinley's healing. It spilled over and it blessed so many. And so many of you that have followed her story, it's just been flowing and over and over and over again to people. He then goes on to say, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. I'm going to ask the worship band to come and we're going to close. But he says, surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. And I want the prayer team to come as well. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. That word follow is the word radaf, which literally means to pursue, hunt down, or chase after eagerly. It's interesting that everywhere else that David uses the word radaf, he is using it to describe King Saul or to describe the wild animals that's trying to come after him. But in this instant, at the very end of this psalm, David takes the same word and he flips that word upside down. Because it didn't matter how fast his enemies ran after him, the goodness and mercy of his shepherd ran faster. I like to think of the goodness and mercy as the goodness and mercy are the shepherd's border collies. When Rihanna lived on the farm, they had these border collies. And what those border collies roles would do is they would actually, almost like they're hunting and stalking those cattle, they would walk along the edges of the field and make sure if they got out of line, they would like nip their leg to get back in line. They would follow the cattle, and they would push them to make sure they're moving forward into the other field or trying to get them herded up into the barn. I love that picture. Because David was saying that even in the darkest valley, even when he wandered, even when he fails, that his goodness, meaning his provision, was present. And his mercy, which was his forgiveness every time he failed, was present. It was following him. I'm going to have Riker. Can you and Levi come here and help me just for 1 second? We're going to close here. I felt the Lord on this really, really strongly. You see, when Kinley was driving up and down the road on that scooter, we weren't there with her. We couldn't be there with her. But as she was laying on that road, unconscious, do you know who was standing behind her? Goodness and mercy. When we were in that hospital room in the middle of the night and we didn't know what else to do, we could look behind us and see goodness and mercy. I want to encourage some of you. You guys follow me a second. Because here's the thing. Throughout my entire life, I have experienced this. As I've walked throughout my life, even as a young boy, every time I look behind me, you know who was following me? Goodness and mercy. When I was at my lowest and struggling with addiction with pornography, and I just felt like I had so much shame, like I would never overcome this, you know who was still there? Goodness and mercy. Some of you guys have had some really rough reports. But I want to tell you today, that wherever you go in life, you can look behind you and see goodness and mercy. Paul, you've been through cancer multiple times now, and you're getting your chemotherapy. What, tomorrow, right? And you know what's going to happen when Paul goes in that room? He's going to look right behind him, and you know who's going to follow him? Goodness and mercy. Do you know there's been times in my life, you guys be ready to keep up with me, okay? Do you know there's been times in my life where I have tried my best to run from God? I've tried to get away from Him. I've tried to just go my own way, thinking I knew how to get things and how to do things. I can do it in my own power. I can do it in my own strength. I can numb out on social media, all this stuff. Lord, how do you forgive me again? Lord, there's no way that God can forgive me again. And you know what? When I look behind me, what I seen? Goodness and mercy. You guys can sit down. I want to encourage you guys today that whatever you go through in this life, you can look behind you and know that goodness and mercy is following you. Kinley went through that experience, but even throughout the rest of her life, she will know that goodness and mercy will follow her all the days of her life. And because His goodness and mercy follows me, I can dwell in the house of the Lord forever. That word, dwell in the house of the Lord, that word dwell, do you know what that actually means, the word dwell? It means to remain. It means to bring back. Some of you guys today have been running from the Lord. You've been trying to be your own shepherd in this life, trying to get things figured out. And it is time to say, you know what, I'm done running and I'm tired of this and I want to restore my life and my relationship with the Lord. And you need to come for prayer today. Goodness and mercy. Everywhere I look, goodness and mercy. Kathy, when you were laying there with a broken back, didn't think the doctor's giving you a death date. Inside of her room was goodness and mercy. What if goodness and mercy have been following some of you your entire life, but you just never knew it? Some of you today, you're collapsing due to your own success. You've been, you know what actually, gosh, we're so out of time. It's okay, God will figure it out. Matt's panicking, I'm sure, but it's okay. Listen, do you know that a sheep, they would try, when they would try to go off their own way, they would try to find a comfortable place to lay down. And when they found that comfortable place to lay down, they would start like trying to itch themselves, and they would roll on their back. Do you know a sheep has a very flat back, and when it gets on its back, they can't get back over. And a sheep, if they lay on their back long enough, the acids and the gases will build up. They'll begin to bloat, and they will die in a day's time. If a sheep lays there long enough, in a day's time, they will die. Some of you guys are dying right now in your sin. You have a toxic life. You're just filled full of shame and guilt, and you're laying there like, man, this is killing me right now. And the only way that you can get out of that situation is if someone comes along to pick you up. That's it. You have no other hope today. If you do not know Jesus, you have no other hope unless he comes along and flips you over. Otherwise, you're going to die in your sin. And the shepherd doesn't want you to stay in that place, because the shepherd is seeking you out today. Psalm 23 isn't the proof that valleys don't exist. Psalm 23 is proof that the shepherd never abandons the sheep. Some of you are in a valley right now. Some of you are scared, you're hurting, you're confused. But if I've learned anything over these past few weeks, it's the shepherd is still leading my life. The shepherd's still speaking over my life. The shepherd's still protecting me. And so today I want you guys to just stand. We're just going to close with just a quick song. But if you need prayer for any reason today, if you need salvation today, just come up and get this and receive that prayer. So just go ahead and lead us in that worship, guys.
My shepherd, and he is everything I need, so I will not worry, I will not fear the enemy. He said that he loves me, he said that he's with me even though I walk through the valley of shadow and death, and still I know he has good. Take heart in deserts and gardens. He has good plans. He has good plans for me. If I know my Father, I know my Father has good plans. No weapon formed against me will prosper. Is my Savior, so why should I doubt my victory? Why would I question the rod and the staff that comforts me? It quiets the waters, it quiets the storm inside of me. What could be better?